Let's get started with Alabama and South Carolina this weekend there in Columbia. And we all remember what happened last time Alabama went up there in 2010. They got whipped pretty good, 35-21. Of course, as Coach Saban pointed out this week when he was asked if he would use that game for motivation, he said, "What were these kids in the 5th or 6th grade?" He said, I don't really see where that's an issue, but it is an example to the Alabama fans that were there about how intimidating that place can be when those fans get cranked up. What about this game? Terrible start for South Carolina, losing a game against North Carolina that the entire fan base expected to win there in Charlotte. Lose your quarterback, Bentley, for probably the season. Ryan Helinski, the freshman, comes in against Charleston Southern and lights it up. They score over 70 points, so at least they've got a positive vibe going into this game. And for Alabama, it's the first 2 road game, the SEC opener. So what do you think of this matchup?
Well, like I said, both coming off games that were, not good matchups, and both performed extremely well. I haven't had the good fortune to even see a play that Alabama's run this year because of the way the TV's fallen. But I've seen some stuff, on replay and everything. Carolina, on the other hand, I watched both those games almost in total, and they didn't play as well as they could the first game. I think they can play a heck of a lot better. And that being said, I don't know that they can match up with Alabama in too many different positions. But I think Ryan came in, Helinski. I think he looked really good, and they did not have much competition. But still, the way he handled himself, some of the decisions he made, and some of the decisions he did not make were very impressive too. Not doing anything unwise with the ball. So I think the game's going to be a little bit tougher than everybody predicts. But I don't see Carolina seriously threatening a victory in this game.
Let me ask you this, and this is just me as a broadcaster. It may be so off the mark that you may laugh, but I've got my own theory that the opener for South Carolina, while disappointing, kind of frees them up a little bit. And follow me. That was a big game, rivalry game. Mac Brown in his first game as head coach. Of course, Will Muschamp worked for him. And then you go out and you have a miserable fourth quarter and you get beat, and immediately, the fan base just, everything kind of goes into negative spin. Lose your quarterback. But then you come back with Helinski, as we talked about, and you have a huge performance and put up some numbers, got a little momentum back. And I would argue that by losing that game, maybe it frees up Carolina a little bit. They don't feel any pressure. They've got nothing to lose, obviously the game, but nobody's expecting them to win that anyway. You kind of follow me here. Is sometimes in a loss, you kind of takes the edge off, takes the pressure off, lowers the expectations, and you can just kind of come out in this game and let it all hang out? Or is that a factor at all?
I think there's something to that, but I think more importantly, that game was a wake-up call. I think that sometimes they played with confidence to a point that they played without energy. It seemed like it wasn't very emotional for the game, and that's kind of the thing. Coaches don't like to say things like that because now I sound like a broadcaster, but it can be sometimes a situation where players are confident, they're focused, they're just trying to do the job and play up to their ability, knowing they're a good enough team, they're going to win if they do those things. But the next thing you know, you don't have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of emotion, a lot of juice. And I think also that, they were kind of surprised by North Carolina in some ways that, they were a little better than they thought they were, or the little freshman quarterback handled himself better than they thought. They may have given him some looks. They thought that he would make a critical mistake, and he didn't. But they controlled the line of scrimmage in the second half, and I think that's more of a wake-up call than anything that takes the pressure off of them. As a matter of fact, by just favored games, underdog, they don't have enough games left on that roster, on that schedule, to guarantee a bowl game if they can't, win the games versus the North Carolinas. So this is going to be a lot different. Alabama's obviously a lot better football team, and much better than the one they played last week, and much better than North Carolina. And it's going to be another test to find out just where the program at South Carolina is.
So we both agree, it's a 24-point line in the game. We both agree Alabama's better, but South Carolina is at home. What do the Gamecocks, from a football standpoint, an X's and O's standpoint, need to do in this game to get it into the third or fourth quarter and still be, in contention? How do they get themselves in position to possibly pull an upset?
Well, I think the biggest challenge to South Carolina is try to figure out a way to slow down Alabama's running game. It doesn't seem to be the dominant running team. You know, it's got a little more openness, and ever since Tua take over, and they've got unbelievable wide receivers. So it's a little different style, but still stopping the running game is going to be a challenge, which South Carolina has not been good in that. They did last week, but like, as I keep repeating myself, they didn't have much of a challenge last week. And they've had a hard time trying to stop the run, especially as the game has worn on for the last 2 years. Obviously, we've got to get some takeaways. That will help tremendously, shorten some series and take away some possessions. But I really think they've got to find a way to slow down that running game. I don't think anybody's going to shut out their passing game. You just got to minimize the damage.
For Will Muschamp, you know, it's a little bit of a grind there at South Carolina with what you're up against in that division in this conference overall. Do you feel like the fan base still feels good about him? You're right there. You coach for him. You got your pulse on that, you know, your finger on the pulse of that program. Do you feel like everybody's still behind Will Muschamp as a fan base, and they still believe that he's the guy for the job?
Well, I've done 2 other radio shows on Fridays that are local, meaning Columbia. And in the fan base, basically the first week was gone. I mean, you couldn't have convinced them anything to look forward to. I think last week maybe gave him some hope because the quarterback came in and played really well. And again, he's got to play that well against stiffer competition. But I think last week kind of took the pressure off, you know, but the fan base at that point in time, after the first loss, they really felt like that there'd been no progress. And that was the overall, you know, the call-ins I would have to respond to and some of that type of thing. Mm-hmm. That was just the general temperature. Now, I don't know if that's 100%, if that's 50%. I don't know how many of them are that way, but there was a feeling that they had not made any progress. I think they have, and I think time will tell. But fan base, I mean, fans are, it's what have you done for me? Not this week. What have you done for me in the last hour? So they can go hot and cold pretty quickly.
All right, he's only played 1 game, but it was a dynamic performance. Do you think there are some people that feel like this team may be better off with Ryan Helinski than Jake Bentley at quarterback?
I'm sure there are those out there who feel that they will be, and there's some out there who are very apprehensive, wondering if he's going to be able to handle it. There's 2 things. I mean, number one, if he was that good, he would have won it in spring or fall.
True.
But Jake was clearly the guy coming out of practice. Now, sometimes, it's not usually, but sometimes guys don't practice as well as they perform. In other words, they're better in the game situation because they take things when they happen and they make the critical plays. Whereas in practice, you're going to run 50 reps and evaluate both guys on those 50 reps. And one guy looks more consistent, more capable, and makes prettier throws. But the truth of the matter is that thing's scripted, and you're playing against second teamers or third teamers on your football team. So you sometimes can get a false picture. So I think the hope is that Ryan Helinski is a better guy in the course of the game. He makes the critical third down plays. He extends some drop back plays. They haven't been able to get much extension on drop back plays when coverage is there, but the pass rush is not. Maybe he can give them that element. I think that's one of the biggest things in college football today is quarterbacks who can extend plays in the passing game. But those are the things I think that Carolina fans are hoping, and he gave them enough on the field Saturday to think that he can do that. And again, it was a 1AA team, but he handled things well. His mechanics are fantastic, and he did not make any stupid decisions with the ball, which is even more important.
Coach, before we get to the break and come back with another segment with you, I want to ask you about South Carolina's in-state rival, Clemson. Of course, this past Saturday, arguably you could make a case that that's the toughest game on their schedule. A&M came into town, and a lot of hype about the game, a lot of thought process because of what had happened the year before in College Station, that A&M could have a chance to pull the upset, and they never really did. 24-10 final. It was not that close. A&M scored a touchdown there at the end of the game to get their only touchdown on the board. I guess the only thing that surprised me was how dominant Clemson's defense was against an A&M offense that we perceived, or at least I did, to be explosive in nature. I'm sure you were able to, if not watch that game, look at some of the clips and study it a little bit. For Clemson on defense, after losing all those linemen to the NFL, were you surprised at all about how they handled A&M in that game? I
was, because what I'd heard about A&M's offensive line and physical running game. And either they had not played anybody that good or they just didn't perform well. The other thing that hurt A&M, their quarterback, is not really – he doesn't really fit Jimbo's philosophy. He's done a great job with him and gotten him to function within the scheme. But I think the quarterback rating that they've come up with now, the formula, and I think this guy scored out about a 23. And you just can't have plays at critical times that kill drives. But Clemson's defensive philosophy, they are very aggressive. They take a lot of chances. If you don't have a quarterback and a core of receivers that can throw the ball over their head a couple times a game, you're going to get 10, 11 men up on the line of scrimmage almost. When there's 9 yards of the line of scrimmage, almost every play. And they stopped that running game with a lot of run blitzing and being aggressive. And A&M was unable to get them off and get them to pull back and play regular fronts. They just outnumbered them up in the box. They're extremely quick. They're physical. I still don't think their defensive front is as stout as it was last year. Of course, who's that has been. But Clemson's getting it done a little different way. They seem to have a little more trust in the secondary, and they're using the man coverage while they're blitzing up front against the run and the pass. So right now, until somebody can throw the ball and hurt them in the passing game, especially with deep balls, that's all anybody's going to get. And that conference they're playing in, there are very few that can do that. They don't have the talent in that conference to make them change that philosophy.
All right, Coach, we're going to take a break, and we come back on the other side. We're going to look at some other games in the SEC coming up this weekend. I see we got a phone caller who wants to ask you a question. We'll have another segment with the coach, Ellis Johnson, breaking down college football with us every week here on the Gary Harris Show. Stay with us. Coach Ellis Johnson with us on the Bud Light Hotline, talking college football. Coach, let's move on to some other games. An interesting game in Lexington, Florida at Kentucky. I don't think a lot of people realize that Kentucky's 12-3 in their last 15 games. They were in the hunt for the East Division Championship to deepen the season last year. They handled Florida in Gainesville 27-16. This is a Florida team that has designs on making it to Atlanta, but let's be honest. And Kentucky still thinks they can be a factor. Whoever loses this game is probably going to be out. I mean, that's just the reality of it. This is a big, big game early in the season for both these teams.
Yeah, when I look at the big picture in the conference this week, and we used to call this one fixed stats week, when everybody got to play somebody, run up their stats and fix what they couldn't do in the SEC. But this matchup is critical, I think, for Florida, and it's a great chance for Kentucky, to bounce up and maybe make a difference in who's going to win the conference and so forth. But I think Florida's obviously 2-0, but they haven't really played real smoothly, and I think this is a very important game for them. Kentucky can be real stout on defense, and hopefully will be again this year. But it might be a tougher trip up to Lexington than they think it's going to be.
Who do you like in that game?
I still think Florida should win, but I think they're going to have to play a little better and a little bit cleaner than they've been playing. If they have the turnovers and the penalties that they've had during the first two games, they're going to put themselves in a pretty tough situation against a team that could beat them at home.
All right, let's get to Tennessee. And boy, I'm going to use a term that I hate, but it does seem appropriate at this point, dumpster fire. I mean, I don't know any other way to put it. You start out at home with two games that you expect to win. You lose them both, including a Georgia State team that just nobody will ever figure out what happened in that one. BYU's not bad, but still Tennessee was in position to win that game. They couldn't do it. Let's just be honest. Chattanooga rolls in here. Chattanooga's not good. I think Tennessee will get healthy. I think they'll wind up winning this thing going away. But they had better, because if they lose this one, and you and I both like Jeremy Pruitt, but they lose to Chattanooga, then they're going to have the moving van outside his house on Sunday morning. You know that. So this is a big game for Tennessee, not only in terms of getting a win, but I think in how they play. Don't you? I mean, they need to go out
Absolutely.
And they need to take care of business in this one quickly.
Yeah, I think you hit the key thing. I mean, they better feel really good about their football team, cleaning some things up and playing well. They cannot measure that program by Chattanooga, but they've got a decent football team coming in. They've got to be able to execute and come out of that game thinking they've fixed some of these problems. The two early losses, it's bad enough being 0-2, but they were just draining, frustrating losses. I mean, they had Georgia State, and they let them come back and beat them from coming from behind. And then BYU's got a very good football program historically, but they're not a powerhouse, and you've got them at home in Neyland Stadium, and you lose it in 2 overtimes. They got to find a way to start making critical plays, critical third downs, not missing field goals, having better execution things, get first downs and stay on the field. There's just so many little things that they're not doing well when the game's on the line. And so I agree with you. I mean, I don't care who they're playing this week. This is a really, really important game for them. They got to get back on track to have any chance to have a bowl season.
All right, Coach, let's take a phone call. Tom is on the line and got a question for you. How are you, Tom? Go ahead.
Hey, Gary. Coach, I really enjoy Thursday mornings on this show, and I appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. Very insightful, too. I'll give you that. My question to you is, I mean, over here, I'm an Alabama fan, but we're just crazy about Tua. But if I have one criticism of Tua, it would be that he goes for the kill shot too often, or he did last year. I'll put it that way. And if as a head coach, you probably would say, I want the explosive plays, but you can't get them every time. And how would you approach an athlete that has that ability and without taking him down, and hurting his confidence and all that kind of stuff? And do you agree that Tua tends to go for the kill shot too often?
I can't say not seeing him constantly that I feel that way. I feel like he did have some times early in his career. I saw him more back then than I do now. But he tended to want to extend pass plays too frequently. In other words, as you call them as plays, Coach Spurrier had to get used to a scrambling quarterback at one point, Connor Shaw. You call a play and it's there and he misses a read and he doesn't see the guy you want him to throw it to because he's looking for the guy down there at the 5-yard line always. So the next thing you know, he's using his feet. He's extending the plays. Coverage breaks down. And he hits a 50-yard scramble ball. And those were some elements that Alabama didn't have in their offense before then. So I think they probably, they certainly didn't try to squelch it. But if the player is constantly misreading the coverage because he's trying to look for the deep route all the time or he wants to throw the ball over 25 yards every time, you've got to, continue to coach it. And I think some things happened last year, right at the end of the year, that I think probably was more educational than anything coaches tell them on the field. He misread a coverage in the championship game and cost him 6 points. So that I don't know that I can say that he's too aggressive. I do see sometimes these real athletic quarterbacks, they don't want to let things develop on third down. They want to jump out of that pocket and take off. And some of them are good enough athletes, they hurt people moving the sticks, or they even scramble and get a deep throw because of a busted coverage on the scramble.
Yeah, Coach, and Tom, I think that Sark's worked with him a lot on that, and to be to take the short stuff, and so far this season he really hasn't taken that many shots down the field. I think that's something they've worked on. Hey, before we turn you loose, I want to get to LSU and their really big win at Texas last Saturday night. Joe Burrow is lighting it up. They're scoring points, and it does look like they really have committed to a new style offensively. And it's led to 100 points combined in the first 2 games. Now, the flip side of that, and I saw some people criticize their defense, I think their defense is still really good. And we're going to have about a minute for this, but as a defensive coordinator, you can address this. You can't play that type of offense. We've seen it here at Alabama. We've seen it at Auburn. You can't play that type of offense and that many plays, scoring that many points, getting up and down the field, and not have it impact your defense some. I mean, it's going to be hard to go from, say, running 58, 60 plays a game, and now you're running 85 plays, for that defense to put up the same type of stats that it was putting up when you played that old-style offense. Am I correct there?
It is, and it's very hard to explain that to a fan, why that would matter, but it matters. It's sometimes it's time on the bench, it's numbers of plays, it's a lot of things that go into that. It's style of practice, that sometimes – and LSU used to play to their defense. The kicking game and the offense was always in field position. It was always a huge factor in where we're going to let them have the ball. And now it's probably not quite as much of that because they're more concerned about attacking and getting first downs, leading touchdowns. But you're right, and I do agree that LSU is still very good on defense. Texas got a really good offensive team, and they had them around 400 yards. 530 yards, which is not good. But as you say, it kind of got to be one of those type games. It's back and forth, and you're not getting a lot of time sitting on the bench, correct things, fix things, get your legs back under you. So it makes a difference in your overall philosophy of how good you can play on one side of the ball or another.
Great stuff, as always, from the coach. Putting you on the spot here. A couple weeks in, and I haven't watched everybody, but just early, who do you feel like is the best team in the SEC right now?
I think Alabama is. They're just too consistent and too good in tough situations and critical situations. I think I think LSU, Georgia are all right there on the same talent level. They may be even better in some positions, obviously, a few positions. So they'd have tough matchups, but they've got too many guys on that team who've played in big ball games. I'm talking about big ball games, championship ball games, 5 and 10 plays that you got to make to win this championship. And they've been there. And even the year they didn't win, you learn from that. So I would have to give them the edge right now.
All right, Coach. We'll talk to you again next week. Thank you.
Sounds good. Enjoyed it, Gary.